So, what exactly is a coach? When I try to describe what coaching is, I find it useful to compare and contrast it with about three other different modalities that I would say are adjacent, but and with some overlap, but where there are some important distinctions as well. And so, by comparing and contrasting it with some things that are more familiar, we can kind of triangulate in on exactly what coaching is and what it's not. And so, the three that come to mind most readily are therapy, consulting, and mentorship. And again, there's some commonalities between all of them, but some important distinctions. So if we start at the top with therapy, fundamentally where the two are similar is that they're both a series of conversations designed to get you from point A to point B. And along the way, we do things like examining your patterns of thought, your beliefs, assumptions, blind spots, and of course, the emotional content that goes along with that. So it's an introspective process where you're doing some metacognition, so thinking about thinking and examining your feelings and experiences along the way. Where coaching and therapy are quite different, though, is in terms of the approach and the content of what's explored. So let me elaborate. Uh, Typically, with therapy, there tends to be kind of a medicalized model that's applied. In other words, a person will go to therapy when they become aware of something that's arising in their conscious experience that's impeding their ability to function at a normal, healthy baseline level. And so you work with a therapist to kind of get to the root of what that is. And it's often some unresolved or unhealed wound or issue or response to some sort of a trauma from earlier on in life, often in childhood. And so there can be a lot of looking into the past and kind of unpacking and working through that in order to restore a healthy baseline level of functioning. Uh, with coaching, we take the assumption that you're already a healthy, high functioning, successful professional. And so there's nothing that needs to be healed or mended. And so it's a lot less looking in the past and much more future focused, much more goal oriented. And coaching can be more tactical. We may talk about specific scenarios that arise, challenges you're facing now. And it's always with a focus towards how to move forward. One of my coaching mentors put it very succinctly, oversimplifying probably, but it serves its purpose. And what he said was, with therapy, you look to the past and ask why, whereas with coaching, we look to the future and we ask how. So that's the main distinction there. Next on the list is consulting. And my vastly oversimplified 10-second soundbite about what consultants do goes something like this. Typically, you bring in consultants when you've got a specific problem or challenge that you're facing, whether it's a technical or IT challenge, a business process issue, HR, finance, whatever the area is. But you find consultants who have their own domain expertise in that area. And they come into your operation and they get right into the details and perform a thorough analysis. And then at the end of that, they present you with what they believe the solution is, or the answer is, often in the form of a very expensive PowerPoint deck. And then they either stick around to help with the implementation or they hand it off to you and they're off to the next engagement. In a lot of ways, coaching is the opposite of that. And what I mean by that specifically is that as a coach, I will never be the domain expert in your profession or your company or your industry or your life for that matter. That's your area of expertise. And so as a coach, I'm not here to give you the answers or tell you what I think you should do. Rather, my role is to ask provocative questions and engage in a cooperative exploration with you, which has the effect of rapidly accelerating your own process to generating your own insights. There's the old adage, two heads are better than one. There's something about just getting whatever's on your mind out of your head and speaking it out loud, and then having a sounding board and a thought partner work through it with you. And in particular, a thought partner that has the benefit of what I would call the clarity of distance. You know, it's this funny quirk about just how humans work. It's always easier for us to read other people than it is for us to get an accurate read on ourselves. And so as a coach, part of my job is to reflect back what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and what you're saying, or perhaps what I'm not hearing you say, between the lines. an apt saying here is that it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle. And so if you're inside the bottle as a thought partner and a sounding board, I can help you read what's on the label by holding up a mirror. Last on the list is mentorship. And when I think of a mentor, I think of someone who is on the same path or a similar path to the one that you're on, but they're a little further down the road. And so they're showing you the ropes, whether that's the details of how to do a particular job, how to navigate a particular organizational structure, learning about an industry, whatever the case may be. But there tends to take on this teacher-student dynamic when you work with a mentor. Coaching is not so much about that. Although there can be, a coach will have a wealth of experience to draw upon from their own professional life or from the other clients that they've worked with, as well as a coaching toolkit full of mental models, frameworks, exercises, and things that may come to bear. Fundamentally, it's not so much about a one-way transfer of knowledge or information, like from a teacher to a student, and it's much more a partnership of equals. So the coaching relationship is really co-created between the coach and the client, and it's a cooperative, collaborative exploration where the coach is there to support you, listen really well, and ask useful questions that move the conversation forward in the direction of clarity and insight. And what ends up happening is it rapidly accelerates your process to clarity, to insight, and then, of course, to designing actions based on those insights. And with new actions, new behaviors, and new habits, you get new results. That's typically how I explain it to people. Let me know what you think in the comments below if you have any questions or thoughts, or if there's anything you'd like clarification on.